In the aftermath of the Macedonian Wars, Rome stood as the preeminent force in the Greek world, but it had not yet faced the Seleucid Empire directly. That confrontation would come with Antiochus III, known to his subjects as the Great, a monarch who saw himself as the rightful heir of Alexander's Pan-Hellenic legacy. His recent campaigns in the East had reasserted Seleucid authority across large stretches of Asia, and he now turned westward with renewed ambition, not only to recover former holdings in Asia Minor, but to stake a claim in the Hellenic sphere left destabilized by Rome's selective liberations. Antiochus's move into Thrace was the first overt step. He had previously remained east of the Aegean, but now, by occupying Lysimachia and refurbishing Seleucid claims in Thrace and the Hellespont, he directly challenged the Roman-dominated status quo. Mommsen notes that this act alone signaled a shift from coexistence to confrontation. Rome, having declared the freedom of the Greeks, could not allow a new hegemon to emerge under the pretext of restoration. It would make a mockery of Roman prestige. To exacerbate the Roman alarm, Hannibal Barca, Rome's most feared adversary, had taken asylum at Antiochus's court. Although Antiochus did not give Hannibal a military command, his presence was symbolic. The last great enemy of Rome now resided with a king who was beginning to assert claims over the Roman sphere of influence. For the Senate, this was not merely politics, it was unfinished war. Rome issued diplomatic warnings, demanding that Antiochus stay east of the Taurus Mountains and withdraw from Europe. But Antiochus, encouraged by the Aetolian League, believed the Greeks would welcome him as a liberator. He crossed the Aegean in 192 BCE with a small but symbolically powerful force, presenting himself not as a conqueror, but as the champion of Greek autonomy against Roman interference. Yet the reality on the ground did not match the expectation. Many Greek cities had enjoyed relative stability under Roman arbitration and did not rush to join the Seleucid king. Athens remained loyal to Rome, and the Achaean League hesitated. Antiochus found allies only among the more disaffected, particularly the Aetolians, once Roman partners, now bitter over their exclusion from the spoils of earlier wars. Mommsen underscores the deeper irony. Antiochus had taken up the banner of Greek freedom, but without Greek support. He had moved into a vacuum Rome had created, but without the means or legitimacy to fill it. His crossing into Greece was not a campaign of strength, but an act of geopolitical misjudgment. Rome now had both the legal pretext and the strategic motivation to act. Antiochus's incursion was framed as a violation of the freedom of the Greeks, and the Senate moved quickly to authorize war. The conflict that followed would not merely determine who controlled Greece, it would decide whether any Eastern power could ever again rival Rome in defining the political order of the Mediterranean. Antiochus III's decision to entrench himself in central Greece, particularly at the historic pass of Thermopylae, was not only tactical but theatrical. He positioned his forces at the very site of Persian defeat and Greek resistance, a symbolic gesture intended to evoke a pan-Hellenic defense against foreign invaders. But as Mommsen incisively points out, the symbolism rang hollow. Unlike the Persians at Salamis or the Macedonians under Philip, Rome had not come to impose tyranny. It had come under the guise of restoring order and defending treaties that had, until now, largely benefited the Greek polis. By 191 BCE, Antiochus had managed to muster no more than 10,000 troops, despite his empire's vast resources. His reliance on the Aetolians proved costly. They were disorganized, unmotivated, and failed to inspire a broader Greek coalition. Most of Greece remained either neutral or outright hostile to Antiochus's claims. The major Greek leagues, including the Achaeans, now viewed Rome not as an occupier, but as a stabilizing counterweight to imperial pretensions. The Seleucid king found himself isolated, defending territory that neither welcomed him nor could supply him effectively. Rome, recognizing the limited nature of Antiochus's position, acted with surgical precision. The command fell to Manius Acilius Glabrio, whose forces outnumbered and outmaneuvered the Seleucids. Rather than engage in a headlong assault through the pass, Glabrio employed a flanking tactic. While one column fixed Antiochus's troops in the front, another detachment, under Marcus Porcius Cato, executed a mountain march to attack the Seleucid rear, a reversal of the Persian tactic at Thermopylae centuries earlier. Caught between two Roman assaults, Antiochus's army collapsed. His line disintegrated, and the pass, so carefully chosen for its defensibility, became a trap. Antiochus himself fled to Chalcis and then to Ephesus, abandoning the Greek mainland altogether. The campaign, which had begun with rhetorical appeals to Hellenic pride, ended in ignominious flight. Mommsen views this defeat not merely as a battlefield loss, but as the decisive failure of Seleucid ambitions in Europe. Antiochus had hoped to be a new Alexander. Instead, he was expelled as a pretender. More significantly, the battle confirmed that Rome, and not any Hellenistic power, would be the ultimate arbiter of Greek affairs. The illusion of a multipolar Eastern Mediterranean died at Thermopylae. With this, the theater of war shifted permanently. Antiochus would regroup in Asia Minor. But Rome had now demonstrated two things with clarity. It could project power across seas with decisive effect, and it would not tolerate rival claimants to Greek hegemony. The Aetolian League, meanwhile, was left to face the consequences of its misplaced allegiance, bereft of support, broken in prestige, and soon to be punished. The Seleucid withdrawal from Greece after Thermopylae did not end the war. It merely shifted its terrain. For the first time in its history, Rome prepared to launch a full military campaign into Asia, across the Aegean Sea, with the intent not just to repel an aggressor, but to dismantle a monarch's capacity for future threat. Antiochus had fled to Ephesus, but he remained defiant, consolidating his forces and rallying the remnants of his influence in Asia Minor. The Roman command for this unprecedented operation fell to Lucius Cornelius Scipio, later surnamed Asiaticus, who was accompanied by his brother, the famed Publius Scipio Africanus. Though the elder Scipio held no formal command, his strategic counsel, and his presence alone, served as both a moral asset and a deterrent. Mommsen notes the symbolic resonance. The victor of Zama now marched against Hannibal's new protector. Antiochus, though weakened, still controlled significant resources. He commanded a large and diverse army, including phalanx infantry, elephants, cavalry, and contingents from across his empire. Yet the cohesion of this force was questionable. His troops represented multiple ethnicities and regions with varying loyalties, and his generalship lacked the organizational clarity of the Roman manipular system. The Seleucid strategy hinged on defense, positioning at Magnesia ad Sipylum, near Sardis, and awaiting Roman advance. But even here, Antiochus failed to unify the local support. Unlike Rome, which brought with it the allegiance of Pergamum and Rhodes, Antiochus could no longer command the respect of the smaller Anatolian states. His former allies were now Rome's clients, or had adopted a posture of neutrality. In 190 BCE, the armies met at the Battle of Magnesia, a confrontation that would shape the balance of power for a generation. Antiochus deployed his elephants at the front, following the pattern of Hellenistic kingship, and his heavy infantry was arrayed in traditional phalanx lines. But Mommsen underscores the fatal mismatch. The Roman army, built on mobility, discipline, and flexibility, simply outmaneuvered the Seleucids at every point. Particularly catastrophic was the breakdown of Antiochus's left flank. Roman and Pergamene cavalry exploited weaknesses, and the elephants, poorly controlled and inadequately trained, caused disorder within their own ranks when panicked. The Roman legions advanced steadily, turning confusion into rout. Antiochus himself escaped the field, but his army was annihilated. Mommsen interprets this victory not only as a military triumph, but as the symbolic end of Hellenistic parity with Rome. At Cynocephaly, the phalanx had been broken. At Magnesia, the monarchic model of resistance was shattered. The Eastern Mediterranean was no longer a field of rival kingdoms. It was a Roman domain in all but name. The campaign also cemented the Scipio family's dominance in Roman politics. Lucius Scipio would take the honorific Asiaticus, and Publius's role, though informal, reaffirmed his place as the Republic's foremost military figure. But beneath the accolades, Mommsen perceives the underlying transformation. Rome was no longer simply reacting to threats. It was actively shaping the geopolitical order far beyond its borders. The Republic had crossed a Rubicon of its own. No longer confined to Italy or Sicily, it now imposed its will in Asia. With the Seleucid army crushed at Magnesia, the war entered its final phase, not of military confrontation, but of diplomatic imposition. Rome had won decisively in the field, and now it sought to reshape the political landscape of the Eastern Mediterranean in accordance with its interests, without assuming direct imperial obligations. This was the principle that underpinned the Treaty of Apamea, concluded in 188 BCE. Antiochus III, though defeated, remained king, but his authority was now sharply curtailed. The terms imposed by Rome, as Mommsen emphasizes, were not simply punitive. They were strategically designed to eliminate the Seleucid presence in Asia Minor and to prevent any future resurgence of their influence west of the Taurus Mountains. Among the treaty's key stipulations, territorial reduction. Antiochus had to surrender all lands west of the Taurus Mountains, effectively confining the Seleucid Empire to Syria and parts of Mesopotamia. The vacuum left in Asia Minor was not filled by Roman annexation, but by empowering Rome's allies. Pergamum, under King Eumenes II, received large tracts of land in Phrygia and Lydia. Rhodes was granted control over Lycia and Curia. Military limitations. The Seleucid navy was dismantled. Antiochus was forbidden from sailing west of the Taurus. He was also required to surrender all war elephants and to promise never to train or maintain them in the future, a direct attempt to break the traditional symbols of Hellenistic royal power. Financial reparations. A massive indemnity of 15,000 talents was imposed, payable in installments. This economic burden was designed to cripple Antiochus's ability to fund future military campaigns and to tie his regime to a long-term condition of dependency. Extradition of enemies. The treaty included a demand for the surrender of anti-Roman fugitives, most notably Hannibal. Though Antiochus reluctantly agreed, Hannibal escaped before he could be captured. Mommsen underscores the elegance of Rome's strategy. Rather than occupying or governing Asia Minor, the Republic reconfigured the balance of power through proxy arrangements. Allies were rewarded, enemies debilitated, and no single actor remained capable of challenging Roman influence. The Republic avoided the administrative burden of direct rule while ensuring absolute strategic dominance. In effect, Rome now dictated the borders, armies, and diplomacy of the Hellenistic world. No monarch could wage war, alter alliances, or even raise a fleet without Roman oversight. What had once been a multipolar world had been reduced to a Roman-centric order, enforced not by provincial governors, but by treaties, tributes, and garrisons manned by allies. The Treaty of Apamea thus did not only close a chapter of war, it marked the end of effective Seleucid competition for dominance in the Mediterranean. From this point forward, Antiochus and his successors were shadows of their former power, hemmed in geographically, depleted financially, and strategically isolated. Mommsen interprets this moment not as the emergence of a Roman Empire per se, but as the consolidation of a new kind of dominion, a sphere of influence so complete that it rendered traditional conquest redundant. Rome, he concludes, now governed through leverage, not legislation. Its authority had crossed from military to systemic. Its power had become the architecture in which the rest of the ancient world was now compelled to live. Following the conclusion of the war and the signing of the Treaty of Apamea, Rome's focus shifted from defeating Antiochus to managing the new international order it had created. In this final section of Chapter 9, Mommsen emphasizes the long-term implications of Rome's victory, not just in terms of geopolitical dominance, but in how Rome's strategy redefined the architecture of Mediterranean power. The Republic did not annex territory or establish formal provinces in Asia Minor. Instead, it acted as arbiter and allocator, redistributing authority to its loyal allies, Pergamum and Rhodes, in a calculated balance that allowed Rome to maintain supremacy without governance. Pergamum, under Eumenes II, emerged as a regional hegemon, empowered by Roman arms but still dependent on Roman goodwill. Rhodes, similarly rewarded with influence over coastal Asia Minor, served as a naval guardian and a buffer against residual threats. This distribution of power was not egalitarian. It was hierarchical and instrumental. Rome chose winners not on merit, but on strategic utility. These client states became extensions of Roman policy, managing local affairs while deferring to Roman interests in matters of diplomacy, warfare, and regional stability. Mommsen stresses the deliberate restraint in Rome's approach. It refused to absorb conquered lands into the Republic, opting instead for a system of indirect rule. This allowed Rome to avoid the administrative burden of occupation while still ensuring compliance. The Republic presented itself not as an empire builder, but as a protector of order, a rhetorical stance that veiled its emerging hegemony. Moreover, the military discipline and diplomatic cunning of Roman commanders throughout the campaign served to elevate the prestige of the Senate abroad, but also shifted the internal equilibrium of the Republic. Men like Lucius Scipio Asiaticus, now bathed in triumph, and Scipio Africanus, with unmatched personal authority, revealed the latent tensions between the Republic's civic framework and the imperial scale of its military operations. The Roman Senate remained the central decision-making body, but it now presided over a foreign policy apparatus that functioned with the discretion and initiative of generals abroad. Victory in the East, while stabilizing the Mediterranean, concentrated power in individuals whose personal commands and loyalties could not always be guaranteed. Rome had preserved its republican institutions, but their adequacy for empire was now under pressure. Finally, Mommsen reflects on how Rome's victory in Asia, achieved without a vision of long-term annexation, laid the groundwork for a new era of soft dominion. The Republic became the arbiter of monarchs, the designer of treaties, and the unspoken guarantor of peace. No king could wage war or form alliances without Roman acquiescence. The Mediterranean world, once divided among rival powers, now operated under a single hegemonic framework, Roman in structure, though not yet in name. Thus, the war with Antiochus did not simply end with Roman victory. It marked a transformation, from Rome as a reactive power defending its allies, to Rome as the architect of an international order, unrivaled, unchallenged, and indispensable. In the final reflections of Chapter 9, Theodor Mommsen turns his analytical lens toward the internal consequences of Rome's Eastern triumph. The war with Antiochus had been won with remarkable speed and efficiency, but it left behind a new challenge: how to reconcile the machinery of republican governance with the demands of a trans-Mediterranean dominion. Rome had maintained its traditional institutions, consuls, the Senate, and citizen assemblies, but now these were presiding over an empire in all but name. Decisions made in the Curia now reshaped kingdoms. Roman envoys redrew maps, and commanders on foreign soil held the power to act with strategic autonomy, often with limited oversight from the Senate. This posed a new structural problem. Where did authority truly reside? At home or in the field? Mommsen focuses particularly on the figure of Scipio Africanus, who, though only a legate in the war against Antiochus, had shaped much of its strategy and diplomacy. His enormous prestige following Zama had only grown. His presence during the campaign conferred legitimacy, but it also exposed the fragile line between public service and personal supremacy. Scipio's influence was so commanding that it overshadowed his nominal superior, Lucius Scipio Asiaticus. Such figures were no longer mere citizens temporarily empowered, they had become states within the state. The triumphs and accolades that followed the victory exacerbated this trend. Lucius Scipio took the title Asiaticus, mirroring his brother's Africanus, and celebrated a triumph unprecedented in scale. Gold, art, arms, and captives poured into the city, wealth that astonished the Roman populace and signaled a shift in the Republic's material culture. The spoils of the East did more than enrich Rome. They changed its expectations, widened its inequalities, and created new fault lines within its political elite. Mommsen highlights that the real danger was not monarchy, but oligarchic instability. The Senate remained formally in control, but as commanders became increasingly powerful and wealth flowed from provinces not yet formally incorporated, a new nobility of conquest emerged. These men were not content with honors. They demanded influence, offices, and control of future campaigns. Their followers, indebted clients, and ambitious rivals alike, fractured Rome's internal coherence. Even as Rome claimed to have restored balance to the Hellenistic world, it had unbalanced its own internal structure. Foreign wars brought prestige, but they also elevated individuals above institutions. The Roman constitution, designed for a city-state managing Italy, was now the nervous system of a Mediterranean-wide network of alliances, dependencies, and obligations. Thus, Chapter 9 closes not on the field of Magnesia, but in the streets and chambers of Rome itself. Mommsen's final warning is clear. Victory had made Rome great, but it had also made her vulnerable to herself. The Republic had conquered Antiochus and neutralized Hannibal. Yet in doing so, it had unleashed forces within, wealth, ambition, inequality, and overreach, that no external enemy could ever match. The East was now under Roman sway, but the Republic's foundations had begun to tremble. We'd love to hear your thoughts on possible future topics. What areas of human evolution would you like to explore next? Leave your suggestions in the comments, and let's keep the conversation going. As always, our references and further reading are listed in the description below if you'd like to dive deeper into the subject. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next episode.